Hi guys, it's Jess here from Bikes and Laces, and today we are kickstarting the podcast mini-series, and I am starting with the one and only wonderful Luke Tyburski. Now, Luke has been on one of our platforms before in a live stream that we held on Instagram. You can go and check out that video on our Bikes and Laces YouTube channel as well. But today I am sharing with you the chat that I had with him all about his podcast called Luke's Lowdown Podcast. So do go and check it out and make sure to check out this video and let us know your thoughts at the end of this. Okay, so I think maybe before I start asking questions about the podcast, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, so then if anyone new jumps on and they don't know you, they can find out a little bit about Luke?
Yeah, no worries, Jess. Thanks for having me on and having a chat. So, who is Luke? It's a great question. It's a question I ask myself every day, and I'm still looking for those answers. But I'm an Aussie. Probably tell from the accent, but I have lived over here in the UK for must be 12 years now, and my background is a professional footballer in the lower leagues. I bounced around the world kicking a ball, and then I battled depression for nearly 10 years, but for a period of time. And in that period of time, I basically tried to escape from life and became addicted to endurance sports. And, I say addicted because I was chasing the biggest, the craziest challenges that I could come up with myself, and also the biggest and craziest races that I could find, because I didn't want to face up to the fact that I was battling with depression, I was binge eating, I had suicidal tendencies and insomnia. So my form of coping mechanism was endurance sports, and I did races like the Marathon des Sables. I ran down Mount Everest. I did the double brutal extreme triathlon, which is a double Ironman triathlon in North Wales, and that was my first ever, and yes, to this day, my only triathlon race. But I have done other swim, bike, run challenges, like my 2,000 kilometer in 12-day ultimate triathlon from Morocco to Monaco, that had a award-winning documentary made about it called The Ultimate Triathlon, which is on Amazon Prime, and I know you've seen that. And these days I still do big challenges. I've got a lot better relationship with endurance sports than I did, say, 5 years ago, and now I use my background as an elite athlete and also exercise science to coach other athletes from a physical perspective, so helping them achieve their triathlon, their running, their mountaineering, adventure clients I have, but also to help people train their minds to get out of their own way and achieve things that they may think they want or they do want, but they don't really know how to get it. So performance mindset coach is the tagline that I give myself. But yeah, and that's what I do these days. A lot of corporate speaking, keynote talks virtually these days as well. So that keeps me busy on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'm definitely seen your ultimate triathlon and read the book that goes along with it as well. So highly recommend it for bikes. So today we're going to chat about your podcast. Now I've been kind of revisiting some of the episodes on it. And yeah, just kind of give a bit of a summary of your podcast and roughly what it's all about. How would you summarize it?
So that's a good question. So the Luke's Lowdown podcast was something that I started years ago, maybe 4 years ago, potentially, as a way of just sharing snippets, thoughts, ideas, to help people perform in their everyday life. And I've been on a lot of podcasts all around the world, some long form, 3 hours, I think, or 3.5 hours is my longest one I've been a guest on, and I've been on ones that are only 20-30 minutes and everything in between, and all different sort of topics that we've discussed. And with the Luke's Lowdown podcast, I thought, or initially thought, is I want to give people one thing to think about. So you can listen to a podcast for an hour and a half, and it's almost like you need a notepad to write down when you get these takeaways, or when someone says something really insightful, or when someone gives you a step-by-step process to achieve something, or when someone gives you a story that you want to go back and relive it. And I love that form of podcast, long form stuff and informative. But I thought, why don't I focus on giving people one thing, one concept, and they listen to it for 15, 20 minutes, and it's simply one takeaway from the podcast. And that's how I set out to start the Luke's Lowdown podcast. And it was just to give people one thing to think about. And I wanted to keep them short. A lot of them are between 10 and 20 minutes. Yeah. And it's all focused around one concept. And I did this in a way that I could manage with my daily life, whereas I bundled them into blocks of 10 as a series. So I would pre-record 10 and then release them every week. And the plan was to sort of do 2 or 3 a year. And then it went down to sort of 2 a year. And sometimes I missed large periods of time. But then I would pre-record 10 and then throw them back out there. And that's how that's where my podcast came from. And that's where it will always be like that.
Yeah, it's quite nice just having that one thing to focus on. I like to listen to them if I'm cycling, because I only cycle indoors, so just kind of listening and having that one point that I can focus around. And I think the way it's laid out is really nice, because it's that one point. You can then latch that on to whatever you're reflecting on or thinking over or planning towards and stuff like that, and that works really well. I mean, in summarising it, you have actually answered my next question, which was, what is the initial inspiration behind it? And it's like you say, it is to give people that one thing to think about and that one thing to focus on, which is really, really nice. So you've kind of touched on that's how it's going to go. Have you got any main kind of future goals coming up for the podcast?
Yeah, look, we live in this world where so many of us consume, or we look for content to consume. And that's just the world we live in right now. And we all have a limited amount of time every day. We all have a limited amount of energy every day. So I'm conscious of that, and I'm very protective of my energy and my time. And I would love to say, yeah, I want to do a podcast. I'm going to do an episode every week, and just keep doing that, rock out 50 odd every year. But I know that's not realistic for everything else I'm trying to do in life. And so I am going to, I've just started to write down what the episodes are going to be. I am going to pre-record another series and hopefully launch that in March, April 2021. So yeah, look, there's definitely going to be a couple more series this year. I also want to do another series where I don't interview guests. I'm not really sure. There's very few where I've had a guest on, maybe even none. It's just me. So I do want to do a series of where I talk to other endurance athletes, and not just talk about their endurance feats or their sport, but more so, I should say, is what has endurance sports taught them in terms of life lessons. So there's going to be a series of that with 10 different athletes who I don't necessarily focus on what they've done physically in their endurance sports career, but what their endurance sports career has taught them about life and how they use that on a daily basis.
Look back over things and reflect and learn. It's something I've grown up with, and it's really nice to learn things from other people as well. So hearing about what they've learned to help them can almost inspire you to really pay attention to kind of your own things that you've done and what you've picked up from it, which is really, really nice. So I've got a couple more questions, and the first one is, do you have a favourite episode of your podcast? And if so, what is it?
Do I have a favourite episode of my podcast? I'm not going to lie, I'm scrolling through now because there's nothing that jumps to mind, but I do know that there's a couple that I've been excited to release and to share. I think one of my favorites definitely will be prioritizing for success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically, we have, as I said before, a limited amount of time, and I would love to do a podcast every week, and I would love to record it with video and audio and chuck it on YouTube and chuck it on all the podcast platforms and do that and make it really polished and have it and make it sound really amazing and really be insightful and thoughtful for every episode. I would love to do that, but in order for me to do that, I have to either hire a team, right? And it's not where I want to spend my money right now from my business and doing that, or I would have to do it myself, which would mean I would need to not do other things that I've been working on. So it's about prioritizing and what is important to you right now and what's going to help you get to where you want to go. And it's easy to say yes to, I'm going to do this podcast, I'm going to train for this adventure, I'm going to take on a dozen new coaching clients, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But then when you stop, a lot of the times people spread themselves too thin, so you're only doing a few little bits well. And one of the things that's in prioritizing for success is you've got to realize that if you want to do something, then you can't do other things, and that's what prioritizing is. And yes, if you've got finances that you can use, then that saves a lot of problems. You paid someone to do it, simple. If that's not you, then you have to prioritize what you're doing, when you're doing it, in order to achieve that success. So that's definitely one of the favorites. And also the one on excuses. I think it's called Stop Making Excuses, because in this world, we all make excuses. And my definition of excuses is a small justification to make you feel better about yourself for doing or not doing something. And I explain that in a little bit more detail during the podcast.
Yeah, definitely a very good episode. And one that appeals to me because it is something I do make excuses. Less so nowadays, but still there.
Can I ask you a question, Jess?
Of course you can.
What's your favourite episode of the Lowdown podcast?
My favourite episode, I can't remember the title of it, but it's kind of where you start to go into talking about that almost negative mind, all those negative thoughts that pop up into your head, and you start to really talk about the negative mind gremlins, as you phrased them. That's the one that sits with me. And the reason that one sits with me is because that is something I've battled every single day and still do, but I'm more aware of it and I'm more aware of how to deal with it, and that is probably the one that really kind of sits the strongest with it. So that is my favourite to go to, but I do enjoy listening to all of them because you learn something new from them and you do get that takeaway, and it is that one thing that you can focus on rather than thinking I've got to make a list of all these. You can just latch onto that one thought and really pay close attention to it. So
cool, I like it.
So that one's mine. And then my last kind of question to round it up is, where can people find your podcast?
It's everywhere that you listen to podcasts on. Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, Google Podcasts. Its central hub is Anchor, and yeah, it's distributed. I'm looking at it now: Stitcher, Spotify, Radio Public, Podbean, Pocket Casts, Overcast, Google Podcast, Castbox, I didn't even know these existed,
I
Breaker,
must admit, half of these I didn't know existed.
and Apple Podcasts. Yeah, all of the main ones that we listen to podcasts on. It's called the Luke's Lowdown podcast. There hasn't been a new series this year. I finished one at the end of towards the end of last year, but there is one coming soon. And yeah, as I said, like I don't really think I'm going to change my format. I like, yeah, as I said, I love podcasts. I love long form podcasts where you tell a story and you hear someone's story, or someone's really insightful talking about one specific thing, and they go into detail. But there's so many things to digest, and the thing that I wanted to do with the Luke's Lowdown podcast was just, as I said, give people that one thing, that one takeaway, and then they can apply that in their sporting life, in their training life, in their professional life, in their daily life, because everything that I talk about, every takeaway that you get, you can convert into all areas of your life. And that's what I want to do, is not just empower people or be insightful or educate people on sport and nutrition and performance, but also on life performance, so they can achieve the goals that they want to achieve, get out of their own way, and see the world for what it is, this amazing place where literally we can achieve anything if we truly want to prioritize for success.
Perfect. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to some more future episodes coming out, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come and have a chat with me today. I really appreciate it. It's great to have you back and be able to put you back up on the channel again. And it's just been great to chat to you a bit more about the podcast. So I think that's it for all my questions. You actually answered about 3 in 1 question, so it's rounded it up a lot quicker than I anticipated, actually. But I do really appreciate it. So thank you very much for coming on and having a chat with me today.
No problem, Jess. It's always a pleasure to talk to you over at Bikes and Laces and to support what you're doing, because you're putting out a lot of cool content, a lot of insightful stuff, and I love being part of it whenever I can.
So that's the end of the first episode of the mini podcast series, and I just want to say thank you very much to Luke for coming and spending his time chatting with me about his podcast. If you would like to check out some more details about Luke, then you can head to the links in the description. And if you would like to share your thoughts on his podcast and the chat that we had with him, then do drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up, as it really helps us get it out to many other people who like similar things. And make sure that you hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all the new content we post every single week and the next 3 episodes of the mini podcast series. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for our next special guest from the podcast called Aid Station, which I am really enjoying.